welcome to our water panel where we have three water experts who are going to answer the question, can sound water policy make the water flow? So we'll dive into that one. I'm sorry, I love water puns, so so if I hear some groaning, it's okay. But thank you for coming. My name's Larry French. I'm with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, a senior fellow with water policy there. And it's my pleasure to welcome you and to introduce our all-star panel of water experts here. I was mentioning to someone earlier, I can't think of three people I'd rather have on a panel to discuss the water challenges in Texas. And we'll kind of dive into their introductions here in just a second. But as you know, water is a huge issue in Texas. Water supply, the water concerns. If you were here yesterday at our luncheon, you heard Speaker Burrows mention water as one of the top issues of the state. In fact, I think he then said it was the top issue. So it's got the attention of the decision makers and the state leadership for sure. In fact, last year, the governor made water one of the top priorities, as you know. So let me introduce our panel here. I'll just kind of go from my left down the row here. To my left is Senator Charles Perry. Senator Perry is currently the chairman of the Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs, and he's been that chairman probably for what, 15 years? Yeah, so since 2015. So he has a great deal of experience and expertise in that. He also co-chairs the State Water Implementation Fund for Texas, the advisory committee for that, the Texas Infrastructure Resiliency Fund. He also chairs the Senate Committee on Disaster Preparedness and Flooding, and Governor Abbott appointed him to be on the Southwestern States Water Commission and the Western States Water Council. I can't imagine that you have any free time with all of the responsibilities. He represents Senate District 28, where he grew up, and he graduated from Sweetwater High School. He's been very, very active in his community and served in lots of organizations and roles. He earned his Bachelor of Business Administration in Accounting and Management Information Systems from Texas Tech. He and his wife Jacqueline have a daughter, son, and 5 grandchildren. So welcome, Senator Perry. Glad to have you with us. In the center seat is Cody Harris. Representative Harris is the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, and he's represented House District 8 since 2019. He's also been very, very involved in a number of House committees and organizations. He's a member of the Texas Water Caucus, Texas Nuclear Caucus, and the House Information and Technology Caucus and other groups. Here again is a man with very little free time, I suspect. He graduated from Texas A&M University and the Texas Agricultural Lifetime Leadership Program. Mr. Harris is a 5th generation East Texan and has volunteered and served in many leadership roles in the Palestine area and around there. So welcome Representative Harris to the panel. And at the end there is L'Oreal Stepney. She's the chairwoman of the Texas Water Development Board. She was appointed by Governor Abbott to that position to chair the board, and she's the first engineer to serve as chair since the board was reconstituted about 12, 13 years ago into a 3-member appointed board. So a full-time board, I might add. The governor also appointed her to the Environmental Flows Advisory Group in the Western States Water Council. Now, the agency she runs manages a $26 billion portfolio. She oversees the preparation of the Texas State Water Plan, the State Flood Plan, and also various water science and infrastructure financing functions. She's prioritized workforce and leadership development and has resulted in the first formal mentorship program and engineering career ladder at the agency. So that's been a big accomplishment and much needed. She has previously served as Deputy Executive Director of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And as a personal note, I would have meetings with Chairwoman Stepney back in the day when we talked over groundwater issues. So we go back a few years, and I've always appreciated her grace and her knowledge of water issues. She got her bachelor's in aerospace engineering and a master's in civil engineering from the University of Texas at Austin, and she's a licensed professional engineer. So I'm going to add that, this is a panel, not only of water experts, but regional experts. So we've got West Texas, East Texas, Central Texas, Texas Tech, A&M, and Longhorns. How could you have a better spectrum of experts in one room? So thank you very much. So as we get started here, water's been a huge issue. You've probably been looking at the headlines just in the last couple of days here. Just about everybody who comes up to me asks about data centers. And water usage in data centers is a big issue. Other people come up and say, what's going on with Corpus Christi? What's the water situation there? What's going on? People are generally aware of the drought conditions that we experience and the shortages and the projections for that. So water is really on people's minds. So we're going to dive in, again, another water pun for you, to various topics like this. But I'd like to first start off with Senator Perry, and because I think he can give us some good context and history on where we are, particularly with the legislature and the funding for much needed water projects. So last year, the 89th legislature produced some very significant legislation to generate a consistent stream of revenue to fund water projects. And that was followed by overwhelming approval by Texas voters of Proposition 4 to implement the flow of $1 billion per year from state sales tax into the Texas Water Fund. So Senator Perry, if you could kind of review how that progressed last session and help us kind of get a context of what that was and how it happened.
Yeah, sure. So politics is timing, a lot of it, and most of the time, like people, we procrastinate until there's an awareness or a crisis or some event that raises the issue. We've been in a water problem for decades, and we just don't recognize it when your tap comes on. I showered today, so there's clearly no water issues, correct? That's our biggest challenge, truthfully, is a lack of understanding that water is a finite source in Texas. Groundwater, surface water, brackish water, those things are all out there, but undeveloped, they're no supply at all. So in our water plan in itself, our current water plan will tell you we will not meet our water planning needs. I mean, our own plan says we're not going to get there if you look at the plan with honesty. And I use this example, and people have heard me speak. 4 reservoirs were supposed to deliver water to Texans in 2020. 4 reservoirs, 2020. I think the acre feet were somewhere around 1 million plus. Those have not even started federal permitting or state permitting or eminent domain conversations. It is 30 plus years out, if they even happen now because of politics and other things, funding. So it's the water plan that I started with and I will end with and live with. But a water plan that does not meet the needs it was intended to meet is a no plan at all. So that's where my passion, if you will, I talked about water in 2011 when I was elected as a representative. So this is something I came into the legislature with 16 years ago and will leave the legislature with. We have to deal with water. Water is the only thing that keeps this state from being where it needs to be or can be, or no limits to where it will go if we actually address it. So last session was accumulation of a lot of things. We had industry beginning to rumble that, hey, we're running out of water. Several chip factories that had came here with the understanding they could be here. We're finding out that for the next phase of operations, they couldn't get their 40 million gallon a day requirement from where they sat. So the business environment finally changed a little bit and caught the interest of statewide. The reason we have not got a water plan at the level it needs to be and where it should be in the chronological order of that plan is funding. Pure and simple. Water is the one thing that you can legitimately fix with funding. I mean, it's just money. We have undeveloped supplies. We need more. We have to have funding to develop it. So what level of funding, who does that come from and where it was is where the Senate Bill 7, HJR 7 came through. The Corpus, I don't want to beat up Corpus. I'm going to tell you what you need to look to Corpus at. Corpus is a case study why last year's funding had to happen. There is not a mayor in this state that can tell someone in their constituency in today's political cycles, we need $20 more a month to build out a water supply that your grandkids will drink or your kids will drink. Water is 20 years in the making if you need it today. They're finding that out now. They should have been drinking from a desal plant off the bay this year. But politically, they voted councils out, applied the right pressures to where they got to the no vote to raise rates to build the plants. And that's why I focused on the funding side is state has the wealth to leverage, to front load, to have the conversations to get things moving. And then just maybe the political climate will change if they're getting water delivered because the state front loaded some of the cost. These are too big, too expensive, and too long term. And then the other thing in the plan that's probably not as apparent, we have to have a regional based planning. We can no longer let one city build its water supply absent of the city next to it or the county next to it when if they had combined efforts and energies with the board, and I've had that directive, and they came out with a letter the other day said, we will look to a regional, meaning if you got 20 cities in the region asking for water supply money, but they're not talking, probably those same 20 cities combined maximize taxpayer use dollars and meet a bigger population source. So lots of things, but the reason it happened last session, pure and simple, is we collectively did our work in educating the public that this is something that needed to be. Governor Abbott, to his credit, came on board with it early. We had industry finally chattering that is your water supply. Wall Street was beginning to ask the questions. If we come to Texas and fund private equity, are we going to have water to do what the industry that we're funding needs? And all of those things came to fruition last session. I caution, it's not the solver. We're fixing to have a water updated supply plan that I'm told is north of $170 billion to meet our supply needs. That's not flood, that's not leaky pipes, that's the supply element. 173. Just to put that in perspective, 5 years ago when that plan was created or updated last, it was like 85 billion. So it's never going to be cheaper than today to fix water, and if we don't get people talking about it. And I would go into a lot about the politics of the climate today, but when you're giving the conversation credence that maybe we let the voters have to have a 2/3 vote to vote for something like this, you've just sealed the fate of future infrastructure. So we need to be careful at what we do this next session.
Well, thank you, Senator Perry. That was great context and particularly a good review for all of us. And I hadn't heard that essentially doubling of the estimate. It doesn't surprise me, but it does sort of surprise me in a way, just because of the magnitude of it. So it kind of leads me over to Chairwoman Stepney here, because you run an agency that is responsible for basically doing that. You get the funding, but then you've got projects to evaluate and fund and so forth. So if you could kind of share with us kind of where you are in that process, because as that $1 billion a year begins to flow, and I think it's going to be in a couple of years. It's not yet, but
yes, it's in a couple of
right.
years.
Review us kind of where your agency is at and what kind of preparations you're making.
Well, first off, good morning. I didn't hear too many Longhorns out there. All right, finally.
Thank you.
I mean, finally a little love, because the Aggies. I heard that. What is it? Okay, that. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. So, last year in 2025, the Texas Water Development Board committed $3.6 billion towards water, wastewater, and flood projects. So we're really excited about that. But as the chairman talked about, there's quite a bit of need that we have in Texas. You know, we have that on the leaky pipe side, as well as the need to expand our water resources and water supply. I want to compliment the legislature for their foresight, not only during this last session, but the previous couple of sessions, going back to 2013 when SWIFT was put in place. There have been large investments in water, but this last session was a lot different. So thank you to Chairman Perry, Chairman Harris, the governor, and the legislature for putting in place, Prop 4, which the voters overwhelmingly passed, $1 billion a year for 20 years. So our agency is doing what we normally do, which is we're putting into place and looking at how to allocate those dollars most effectively, looking at the demand and the needs of the state. One great thing about what we saw with SB 7 and the other legislation that passed, the dollars will, be associated with the Texas Water Fund, which is an umbrella fund, which allows the board to allocate dollars to our underlying financial program so we can see where is the need in the state and how can we best prioritize water projects in the state. So we're excited about that. The legislature did some work and expanded what projects fit under new water supply, right? Because innovation is very important, and alternative thinking about how we can supply the water needs of Texas is very important. So we're looking at that as well. As an agency, when we have these big allocations of dollars, $1 billion here or there, we involve the public. We ask for stakeholder input, and we'll do that as well. Our executive administrator is going to bring to the board some ideas. The board has charged him with coming up with a kind of a straw proposal for implementation of our Prop $4 billion that we're going to get every year. I think that will change. How we divide up the pie every year will change because we need to see what the needs of the state are every year. But we're heavily engaged in that process, and then of course we'll have stakeholder input because I think that's very, very important. Right now, we just as in the last legislative session, HB 500, the supplemental appropriation, appropriated a little over $1 billion as well, and so we're in the process of allocating those dollars to projects around the state. So again, getting stakeholder feedback, I think that's very important as we try to figure out where our needs are. Well, we know where our needs are, but how to prioritize the dollars because there is great need.
Well, thank you very much, and that's a tremendous amount of effort to prioritize that, and you've got many, you've got literally thousands of potential projects out there to evaluate. So let me change gears just for a second here and go to Chairman Harris. Last year, the special session, you know where I'm coming with probably, and we're kind of getting into somewhat of a controversial issue, and I have a background in groundwater, and so when I think about that, the whole concept of, and I'll let you explain that, but this legal concept called the rule of capture began to have a lot of conversation, which has not really happened very much, at least in my history. So I found that very fascinating. Chairman Harris, you took a leadership role, basically, in kind of opening up a conversation about that in response to some proposed project in East Texas. So would you mind kind of sharing with us maybe the history of that and kind of where we're at and kind of expand on the rule of capture discussion?
Sure. First of all, I want to commend everybody in the room for being in a policy discussion on water. I mean, young people to not so young people, and young people aren't falling asleep yet. We've got other legislators in the room, our future agricultural commissioner in the room, all here to talk about water. And that's awesome to see so many people engaged. So thank you all. So yeah, a little bit of a controversial topic, all right? So in June, back home in my home county of Anderson County, just basically 2 days after my mom passed away, we got word that there was a big development project with two different locations, one in Henderson County, one in Anderson County. That was, all we knew is that they were going to try to pump a whole lot of groundwater. That's the crux of what we knew. So decided to have a hearing in July. I believe it was on July 15th, where we spent about 11 hours digging into it. And it was really a unique situation because it wasn't just my committee, the members of my committee who were there. It was members of the Senate, other members of the House who are not on natural resources, all there wanting to hear and learn about groundwater, learn about what's going on. And so I think it kind of catapulted us into having a greater understanding of groundwater and the challenges that we're faced with surrounding groundwater. Let me start off by saying groundwater is a private property right in the state of Texas, and that should never change. Full stop, end of story. But we have a duty to make sure that we responsibly manage that groundwater so that future generations of Texans can access it and enjoy it as well. And so the legislature, in its previous wisdom of setting up groundwater conservation districts, I think that was the most acceptable form that they could come up with to manage groundwater. And I think now we're in a situation where, number one, most GCDs don't understand the authority that they have already been given by the Texas legislature to properly manage groundwater. And number two, we have wide areas that are completely without protection, where you just do have free reign of the rule of capture. And so this is definitely going to be a topic of major discussion in the next legislative session. And I'm confident, you know, Senator Perry and I have worked incredibly well together. Even through hard conversations, we sit down, we hash it out, we try to figure out what's best for the state of Texas, period, and move forward together in that. So, you know, if I'm blessed to be the chair of the committee next session, I'll look forward to continuing those conversations. We're going to have interim hearings about it and continue to try to figure out how we solve this incredibly complex problem.
We'll look forward to those hearings for sure. So thank you very much for taking leadership in that area. That's a tough one to tackle, but I think that given the advent of high capacity pumps and the need for the state to look at all sources of water, I think it's a good conversation to have. So thank you for leading that. Let me kind of return. We mentioned a little bit, and Senator Perry, you talked about this, Corpus Christi, and I bring that only up because I wanted just to check, and this might be something we can all weigh in on. Was there a planning issue that needed to be improved on their situation they found themselves in? I know that they've worked on it historically for this desal plant, but sometimes I've looked at regional plans and then see other challenges and wonder sometimes if there's a good connection between the planning and the reality on the ground. So I'm giving a kind of a poorly phrased question, but address that, and that's for everybody as well.
I'm going to address it this way, and I was involved in those conversations, and I actually attended a council meeting one day down there. Senator Hinojosa had invited me down and made a trip over to the port. I can with confidence tell you the situation that Corpus finds itself in today is 100% political. They had adequate opportunity to build out a desal plant. The only thing I would say they didn't control that did have a huge impact on the ultimate outcome of the project cost was COVID. But I could also back up and say that a large reason COVID had the impact it was is because the politics pre-COVID kept delaying the conversation and the process. Had it got on go when the permits were done, they would have had a desal plant today, 100% with surety, at probably 50 million gallons a day. But because of politics, time delays, all over the politics, and then permitting that ensued in that conversation and fights and things, they ended up reverse engineering to what they could afford, which was 30 million gallons a day. The reality is they always had started in the Bay. They should have moved that out to the Gulf at $250 million additional pipeline cost, but it don't get any cheaper, and they could have done a unlimited plant because it was modular in design. It was well designed, well planned, but when you have constituents that refuse to understand that the cost of water going forward and the sense or lack of urgency, because the timing to do a water project at this size is decades, and they are successful at the ballot box to kill an initiative such as this, and now they're scrambling to, unfortunately, for a response that is at least 2 years out, I'm guessing, and that's assuming the fights in the court over the groundwater doesn't stall it. Plus, you've got a refinery system, and I remind people it's a $380 million per day economic impact to Texas. They produce, I think, 25% of the Jet A fuel that our fighter pilots and jet companies depend on. They also are the large LNG exporter conversation. So it is a global security. But I tell people, This is not an anecdote or one-off. This is the canary in the coal mine, because this political tenor and the people that don't want to pay more for nothing and that want free government if at all possible is not isolated to Corpus Christi. And I could go through a list of urban areas in this state today that in the next 10 years, they can tell you today they're going to be short X acre feet of water that politically have no will or no way to get there to start the development of what they need in 10 years. So this is a good study to understand where we're at. I liken it to this. I used to make my kids do things they didn't want to do, knowing it was for their benefit long term. I feel like we've almost evolved to this point where some point in this mix, we've got to get control of the narrative and tell the truth. I would tell you, I don't think anybody was talking about a supply plan that doesn't meet the needs of Texas, because everybody always looked to the supply plan and say, we got a plan, until I started raising that issue 10 years ago. And it wasn't a welcome news, because, oh, you can't stymie economic development. You can't. Well, I've found that until you recognize there's a problem, you can't solve the problem. And I think that's what one of the biggest untold successes is. We now know we have challenges. Good news is we have the resource and we have the undeveloped supply that can meet the needs.
Can I piggyback real quick on what he's talking about? So 100% correct. This is the canary in the coal mine. And because the community politically failed to do what was best for the community, now we get back into groundwater, because as their immediate Band-Aid fix to their supply problem, they're just draining the groundwater next door. Yeah, they don't have much, right? So they're already projected to pump over their modeled available groundwater. So even though they have fixed their water problem, maybe for the short term, like they're not at the edge of the cliff that we thought they would be at the end of this month. Now it's pushed out a few more months. They have detrimentally impacted their neighbors beside them with their groundwater access. So I say that because if you care about protecting aquifer groundwater, it's not enough just to say no, you can't have it. We've got to invest on the front end to make sure that we have water supplies for areas across the state now, so that they do not come and forcibly take groundwater in the future. That's why it's so important. And going back to the funding on HJR 7, if you look at it, when we were in session, it was $154 billion shortfall, right, that we were talking about. Now it's $173 billion shortfall in water supply funding. So HJR 7, 50% of that money is for water supply, new water supply. The other 50% is for existing infrastructure. So really, we're not at 10% of the need. We're half of that. So while we can feel good about what we did to kind of get that going, the truth is we are just barely tacking away at what we need.
Drop in the bucket.
Drop in the bucket.
I'm right there with you.
There you go. Thank you for that pun.
I was just going to add on your question about planning versus implementation. I managed the worst one-year drought on record when I was at TCEQ in 2011. And I always reference that because I can assure you that when you're in the middle of a really, really bad drought, that means everybody else around you is in the middle of a really, really bad drought. And finding water supply can be really, really tough. And so that's one of the reasons I think that the planning process is very important. The Texas Water Development Board, we do three things. We work on water science, we work on water planning, and then we work on water financing. The science informs the planning process. The plans are developed at the regional level, right? So the locals are looking at what their water needs are, population projections, what technological advancements are appropriate for their area, and then we roll that up into the state water plan. But it's important to implement the plan. And true, the $174 billion is over 50 years, but you still have to implement that, or else you will find yourself in a very, very difficult situation. And droughts are very unpredictable. And from time to time in Texas, we have very, very severe droughts. So it's really important for communities to look to implement those strategies. Of course, it can't all be done at one time, right? What we're seeing with the increased costs, of course, construction, labor, supply chain. Chairman Perry mentioned COVID. We're still catching up from all of that. But I think it's important to do that on the front end. On the financing side, and this is all I'll say about Corpus, the board did commit several $100 million for the desal plant for the community. It's a very important part of our state, from the people part as well as the industry part. Chairman Perry did a nice job laying out the national, international importance of Corpus Christi and the state importance for Corpus Christi. So, I'm happy that the board committed those dollars for the desal project.
I think the whole story has been a good reminder, and Chairman Perry, you mentioned this, just the incredible lead time that's required. We go over to the sink and turn on a faucet, and it seems pretty instantaneous. But that water, it took a long time to get that water from its source. I'm not talking just about the actual travel time, but just the planning, the pipelines, the infrastructure, the finance. All of that took a long time, and so it's an important reminder to all of us. Just these are not. It's not a snap of your fingers and things get solved. It takes lots of work, lots of planning, lots of time. The other thing I just wanted to mention also, just to understand the sensitivity of groundwater as a resource. It's a great resource. It's on the menu, but rural Texas completely depends upon groundwater. Agriculture depends mostly on groundwater. I think it's 99% of rural Texans have groundwater as their supply, either in individual wells or the local communities as groundwater. So it's a super sensitive and a vital resource for the health of rural Texas. So just keep that as a context.
And if that doesn't appeal enough to the need to fund these systems and make water supply in rural Texas a priority, point blank, it's rural Texas that is keeping the state of Texas red. It's not the urban centers that are siphoning off all this money, right? So I think we need to prioritize more of our resources towards rural water supply systems, to help rural Texas thrive, so that we can continue to be the incubator for the Texas culture that continues to produce a red Texas.
Outside of red, if you look at the top 3 income revenue streams Texas benefits from in our budget every biennial, it's going to be agriculture, oil and gas, and the ancillary values that come from that. There's other things that are creeping in on those areas, but you can't have a Texas without an oil and gas sector, nor an agricultural sector, plain and simple. We pushed the $358 billion budget, and that's where it comes from. So I told somebody yesterday on this, I understand that 5,000 people in a community doesn't sound like a lot to you. And we need money to do infrastructure that they can no longer afford, partly because the tax base that they have was probably rich enough to do it, but with Robin Hood, we confiscated a bunch of money and redistributed it for schools for the last 50 years. So we'd have a Six Flags in Tahoka if we hadn't taken all the money away. But my point, I guess, being there is, you can let those 5,000 communities not have a wastewater treatment that meets compliance, not have a sewer treatment, and not have a water supply, and they'll just go away. That's option one. Or the state can backfill with funding necessary to keep them going. But either way, if you don't have them, the state budget looks a lot different. So when you think it's just 5,000, those are the people that go out on the oil well and in the crops every day, and 25 million head of cattle in Panhandle. It's a lot of beef, and it's about a half of where it used to be. So if you like your steaks, you drove a car today to the place here, and you're wearing clothes, think an agriculture and a farmer and an oil and gas worker.
That's a great reminder of the importance of all those sectors and how they depend upon water, dependable water. I'm going to kind of stay on the rural theme here, but kind of pivot to the topic that's been very hot lately is data centers. I don't know about you, but every time I turn around, I hear, oh, there's another data center being proposed or whatnot. It just seems to be changing literally daily. And when we were hearing from Senator Sparks the other day, And between his Senate district and yours, Senator Perry, you cover a huge swath of rural Texas, West Texas. And I know that there's been a number of data centers being proposed in that area. So I'll get your thoughts on that. But I wanted to check with Chairwoman Stepney here, because we've recognized, or the state recognizes that we just need to get more information, really, on the scope and the impact on water resources, electricity, all those things. I believe the legislature commissioned the Public Utilities Commission to do a study of that with your cooperation. So kind of bring us up to speed on, I'm sure, I think it's not going to be done until the end of the year, but what can you say about that, or how are you working on that?
Yes, so data centers, we do an annual water use survey every year, and we have collected information on data centers or AI centers or Bitcoin, all of those different entities over the years. But what we find is sometimes that is reported from the municipalities, or sometimes it's reported directly from the data centers. So we don't believe that we have all of the information that we need in order to project the water usage in the state water plans. So yes, the legislature asked us to work with the PUC, Public Utilities Commission, to create a survey where we can get more information on data center water usage. The PUC handles the power end, the electric end, and so sometimes they may see facilities that we wouldn't necessarily see, they wouldn't cross our path. So being able to partner with them to get more information on data centers and also to project their water usage, I think is very, very important. So we're in the middle of that. Both agencies have been collaborating, and pretty soon we'll have a draft of that survey that we can use. I think long term, because this is a growing industry in the state water plan, that will probably be pulled out into its own category under manufacturing, the more we know about those facilities. But right now, what we're interested in is if a municipality has a data center, we want to know about it so that we can track the water supply. And also, what we're learning is, of course, depending on their cooling technology, that really impacts their water use. So working with PUC has been great, and that's something that we're heavily involved in right now.
Well, thanks for that, because I was sitting at breakfast this morning with a group from Phoenix, and they have been heavily impacted by data center growth. And of course, Phoenix is water challenged as much as anybody, so that's been a big issue for them as well. Any other comments on?
Yeah, I unfortunately, between Senator Sparks and I's district, there's 22 data centers under conversation. Probably more we don't know about, and half of those won't happen. Here's what I do know, and I'm probably fortunate that we've had a little time since some of them, but I'll use the one in Abilene, Stargate. It's one of the largest ones out there. And let me preface, there are good actors and there are bad actors. And we have a lot of wildcat and speculators, just like we have in land and everything else. But on this front, I liken the AI data center to this way. If we can ride this tiger long enough till we figure out how to manage it, control it, and use it, it is going to be a game changer in infrastructure development. Why do I say that? I'll give you Stargate Group, Google, customer. They're coming into my district on multiple places, and I've got AI, OpenAI, but they're coming in at the region, and I would say it this way: Texas told these guys you can come, but don't count on us for your power. You got to figure out your gas power and whatever else you're going to do. So most of them got that memo, some didn't. What they didn't do is they woefully underestimated the water situation. But here's what I found with the good actors and the good conversations. One area of my district has brackish aquifers to be developed. It is part of their process 30 years out. They need that water. They wouldn't have been able to afford that water. And these customers on these data centers are looking at it and going, you know what? We write and CapEx checks all day. $35 billion facility. You need $1 billion for a desal plant. Why not? It's good for us. It's good for the region. It's good for the community. Same thing with behind the meter power. They're putting in load and demand. And so over time, the good ones are actually going to solve a lot of problems if they're real. And what I mean by that, Mississippi Hat says they may be .coms with infrastructure in 5 years, and we'll figure that out. But if I can pick up 10 cents on the dollar, a desal plant, and a power behind the meter because they weren't real, I've done a really good job. So this is a positive for us if it's done right. Let me tell you about the water use, the good actors. And this is how I starting to weed the shaft. They say we're only going to use a little bit because we're a closed loop. What does that mean? There's 3 water usage in a data center. There's the potties and people, minimum use. There's the cooler, chip server cooler. That's significant. And then what nobody would talk about is the power cooling. Every generator. So electricity and water is inexplicably linked. 52% of the reliable generation Texas has talked about moving to require water for steamer cooling. So when you get the 3-legged stool of the water use conversation going, some of them don't know, some of them cow down, and some say it's going to be X. The Stargate facility in Abilene, and I use that because it is operational on 2 or 3 buildings now for the last 2 or 3 years, in a meeting with a public waterworks out of Abilene, everything they told them has come to fruition. Spot on, no surprises. They're going to use 80 acre-feet per year. And this is old technology now. Only 80 acre-feet per year to run that facility. So I go back to it matters the model, it matters the customer, and it matters the CapEx. Because if all these 3 things align, the community, the region, and the state has just won. Part of the water supply plan, that $173 billion, a large part of that could be completed in rural Texas, meeting those needs decades earlier on a Wall Street investor's dime with no bonded debt obligation burdening the taxpayer. So this is a window where if we can get this right, I'm real excited. But it's, you just, and the PUC process, because of the way they're having to allocate these requests, is going to actually sort the wheat and the chaff too. So we've got a lot of whether deliberate or not, we have a systemic process here where they literally are going to probably help find those good guys. In a conversation with Google, they came in and said, we're going to save 30% of the water use. It's going to cost us a lot more money on the energy side because we're going to go 100% air cooled. I said, back up, rethink. Go ahead and use the water you need and take the savings on the energy cost and build a desal plant. And the engineer on the other side was like, good idea. And just think about the PR campaign. You're solving all kinds of things. So these companies that are reputable are willing to go there and do the things they need to do, and they have the cash to do it today. So we need to seize that day. The PUC reminded me today, I was talking to ERCOT guys, Lubbock, Texas uses 600 megawatts of power. They've been in existence for 115 years. We are having requests for 2 Lubbock, Texases every day for the grid now. It's wild. It's 600 megawatt request, a gigawatt request. So anyway, I'm kind of bullish. I think it's going to be a good opportunity if we can just manage it long enough to figure these out.
More to come on data centers, I'm quite sure. But that was interesting, and you touched on an area which I wanted to get to. Now I'm going to skip ahead on some of my planned questions, and that is the whole idea of innovative water. The idea that for our future, it's going to require some out-of-the-box thinking on water resources and so forth. Brackish groundwater, I would put in that category. So I wanted to kind of get all of your opinions on where you see opportunities for utilization of brackish groundwater, maybe aquifer storage recovery, desal we've talked about already, which is sort of a brackish groundwater, but kind of expand on that if you would. I'll make it very general for you.
Yeah, I think if we don't look to innovative sources of water supply, we are not going to solve our water problem. End of story. DFW is sitting on a literal ocean of brackish groundwater. When meeting with one of the regional water planning groups a few months ago, going over all of the different sources that they're looking at, said, where's brackish water? We're looking at desalination plants, and said, nah, we're not even considering it. So that needs to change. Y'all need to look at that now. So between brackish desalination, seawater desalination, I think we need to begin to get much more comfortable with water reuse. And I'm not saying you got to drink it, but there are applications that we can use on water reuse. And water conservation needs to be a part of the solution as well. If you're transporting water from one area of the state to another, the receiving area, in my opinion, needs to have some pretty strong water conservation plans in place and in practice before that water is transferred.
I would add one thing there. How many people have a house that was built with a circulating water pump in it? Hot water pump, where you turn your hot water on, it's pretty much instant hot. How many grew up in the house where you turned the shower on and waited to go for 5 minutes before it got warm enough to get in it? Those pumps are $400 to $600. I don't know if the state should take an active role in development permitting and require those and even reimburse some level of it. You think about the water savings in an average household of 4 people taking a shower every day, that they let it run for 100 gallons every day before it's warm enough to get into. They recoup the cost of that pump in 12 months. So when I get to conservation, those are just easy, and I'm told you can retrofit. But we've got to start having some of those to be responsible of the new supply, because the new supply is going to be expensive. We've never paid for water, so we need to be good stewards of what we have. You can't conserve your way into more water. You extend the life of existing, but when you do have the cost of new water blending in and coming in, you need to have those other metrics online. And to your point, if someone gets an export permit and they're not on stage 4 watering requirements, they don't, and water loss data reports show that they're under 10%, they don't deserve to take water to only have it wasted. So I agree with it.
I agree. So, I think of water management strategies and water supplies like building a house, right? You need all these different tools to build a house, and alternative water supplies, our water management strategies is a key part of that. In 2080, 22% of our water management strategies will be made up of things like desal, reuse, and all of those other produce water, all of those other strategies. So we need them all. Conservation, 30%. Make up about 30% in 2080. So I think we need a little bit of everything.
Let me add on the conservation side, and this is a true fact, and this is when I got really engaged. We are depending on a producer, agricultural production, irrigated crop production, to decrease 30% because of economics and lack of supply to develop that to meet the needs of the state. The state is too big and too good and has too many opportunities to basically plan on the demise of an irrigated crop production industry because we didn't do our job. That should not be a proper planning tool, and it's kind of inbred. The original plan in the 2001, 1990 conversations never addressed irrigated crop production. They just assumed it was going to deplete and go away.
That's a sobering reminder of the importance there. And we didn't even touch yet. I mean, there's so many things in terms of water policy that really will involve every citizen of the state. And that's what that was a great reminder on water conservation. We'll all have a role in that. A lot of people can think, oh, well, that's the city's job to do this, or somebody else, River Authority or what have you, Groundwater Conservation District. But everybody will have a stake in this effort to conserve water and to keep our state running on water. I didn't even touch on things like fixing leaky pipes. That's a big issue. A lot of water lost through that. Produced water, Senator Perry, I know that's
I can give you a real quick update.
Give us an update, because that's a huge issue.
Produced water is the water that comes up without an oil and gas industry. They have reached a point in less than 2 years, they have no injection space allowed. There's no more space to put it. If you can't re-inject the produced water that comes up, 26 million barrels of water a day, the oil and gas industry stops drilling. So you can imagine that. So produced water came into being in 2019 as far as a state initiative go. Texas Tech developed a consortium working with New Mexico consortium, Colorado. All that to say is we are now at a point where we have 4 private sector companies One of them, I believe, is already breaking or will be breaking ground on a desal. Another one is looking at how to implement that shortly. We're waiting on about 3 different permit levels with TCEQ, but we only really need one left to actually start using that water. The science and the technology for the last 6 years, 7 years has proved this is a usable water source. It is 500,000 plus acre feet per year as a new source. It solves the oil and gas issues, and it will become a legitimate water supply opportunity for a whole lot of regional areas that are without water if we don't find some alternative. So produced water has done exactly what I knew it could. We just had never taken the time and put the money to actually verify scientifically that it's not toxic, that it's usable, and it will be a viable source of water.
Yeah, totally agree. And I met with TCEQ yesterday, and I think over the next few months, they're going to be finalizing their permitting process. And by the fall, we could literally be looking at having tens of millions of gallons per day permitted in produced
I would
water.
say if you're interested in that, Texas Tech's Produced Water Consortium web, they'll have the white papers they've been doing each year since they've been in existence. The last one is in its final review, should be printed, published in public in the next 30 days or less. That's the one that brings all the toxicity data, all the things that coulda, shoulda, woulda, concerns have all been addressed. So if you're interested in what produced water means, don't take the narrative you can't clean it up and it's going to kill you. Truth of the matter is, produced water has been a conversation for decades. No one has ever spent the money. Back to Texas has the wealth and the resource to do things right. We've done produced water right. It's fixing to be a marketable conversation.
Well, that's great news to hear. I was just in a conversation yesterday with someone who had some very interesting ideas on water treatment for produced water. So it's been great that it's really been bringing out a lot of innovative ideas and good thinking on that. So we just barely skimmed the surface. Another water pun for you. Okay, not that great, I admit it. But it's time to transition to our question and answer from the audience. I'm sure that we're going to have some. So I see hands popping up everywhere. That's great. So I will call on you and wait until a microphone gets to you. If you can identify yourself and then state your question, that'd be great. Okay, hands up again. Yes, the woman here in the white jacket. If you can wait for the mic.
Oh, sure.
There you go.
I'm certainly not an engineer, but I do like to read. There is tech coming out of Israel. It's the atmospheric water generation for like a building. You know, you get the water from the air, the humidity, and it filters through the singular module, and 1,600 gallons a day for a building. I mean, I just think that's a really good option. Is Tech or anyone looking into that? I know MIT is. So it's better than drinking recycled water. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and basically what we're talking about is forced condensation of water, right? And I think it's a really interesting potential. And I talked to a water company that's doing that just a couple of days ago. Told them I was going to invite them whenever I do a hearing on innovative water sources. We need to learn more about this. I think my natural instinct is that the energy consumption in order to do that will probably be the biggest hurdle to get there. It's a high energy intensive use, but another tool in the toolbox that we definitely need to be looking at.
I've had a few vendors come in to speak to me. More, the power source is solar, but for small applications, you know, maybe one unit for a house or something like that. But I've had vendors come and speak to me.
It's a scalability issue, but I think it's in its infancy. And I think as everything that proves to be markedly viable, scalable, it has way. I would argue too, or not argue, I would point out, we've seen some innovative power generations, gravity. A company pitched a deal, they have 20-story building. You can do it different stories, but for a 1 gigawatt supply, 1,613 acre feet of water, one-time charge, the hydraulics in that will generate you a gig of power. Think about where those could be deployed. They're looking for old buildings with empty space in them to do it for inner city. I said, you need to look to desal. But where I'm going with that is you get those power sources set up there. you can use brackish water. And a large part of the cost of desal is power. $500 million for a 1 gigawatt supply. Now that's scalability at a very affordable level. So that's one that I think we need to pursue a little bit and see, because that's a pretty sweet deal. If you can put 13 acre feet of water in a facility to gen you a gigawatt power for 500 million, you can't get that done in any level.
Great question, and a lot of interesting things popping up. I can't imagine 10 years ago some of these ideas being discussed, so that's fantastic. Okay, let's see, right next to you, there's a question.
Hi, I'm Representative Terry Leah Wilson, and I represent Galveston and Chambers County. So I agree with you that this desalination issue has been very, very political, especially for my area where a desalination plant is going that will be shipping water elsewhere. And it will be brackish water out of the Galveston Bay. It's not out of the Gulf. And how can I reassure the community? What they're worried about is, what if we have a bad actor here? And what if they, TCQ, are they going to test every day? So maybe the question is for both, the representatives and you as chairwoman, because I don't know how to reassure them that they're like, well, TCQ will come out and they'll test once and it'll be over and, they'll pass. And then what happens to our oyster industry? What happens to the waters in the Gulf if they are not, equalized or whatever on the water that they're putting back into the bay?
The way I would address that is, I've been out to Israel to look at their water model, been to Israel a few times. They figured out where the discharge needs to be, what kind of current it looks like and how it works, and they do, I believe it's 5 on the Mediterranean in pretty close proximity from geography-wise. They have pictures at the discharge pipe that prior to and post, and the ambient and the salt levels and all the things that go on there. It's actually developed new coral reef. And I go there to say this: there will not be a single discharge into a bay or a gulf or an ocean until years. This is the desal conversation. Corpus got their permit pulled federally in 2018 over the bay conversation. That had already been resolved prior to that. So I have confidence in the process that no one wants to harm an ecosystem, and that you will have enough public comment processes and lawsuits and environmentalists engaged in that all the way up to the point of, yes, we can do this. So I would just say it's the private equity piece of that, or the private market too. Nobody's going to spend billions of dollars into a plant that doesn't have those answers answered, because they don't want to have it shut down 2 weeks after they open. So the whole system environmental that these guys function in, they will get that right before there's a problem. I'm not quite sure the distinction of a brackish and desal coming out of Galveston. So that's a different concept. I guess it's just less salty. But my point, I guess, is the processes, and they have to jump through in the hoops and the permitting and the TCQ and the federal level, especially if it's in the ocean side. It's there. It's not going to let something bad happen.
Okay, we've got a question right up here in the front row.
My name's Bonnie Cudlip. I'm a big agriculture activist. You all obviously are aware of the huge AI data center conversation that is especially occurring in the ag commissioner race right now. With everything that you've seen, Perry, being one of our big ag guys, do you have any immediate concern that these AI data centers are going to basically wreak havoc on the water supply that's affecting agriculture, our farmers and our ranchers, based on what you're currently seeing and interacting with?
Well, I tell people, as a good example, what I talked to earlier, 80 acre feet to the one in Abilene, annual use. Most of them are going to technologies that will require almost zero use other than the power cooling system. So actual usage, but I will also follow up with, if you're already in an area that's short on water and depleting, anything you add to it. But I would compare this to a center pivot on a 1 acre cotton crop uses a whole lot more water than these do. So I'm not justifying that's the reason we should let them do it. I'm saying everybody's paying attention. There are solutions to minimize the usage, but there's even a bigger conversation, we've got to bring in new supplies. We've got to supplant irrigated crop production with the municipals in the region's use so that the municipals use a new supply, leaving that aquifer. And then I'm even in conversations with states contiguous to this that are talking about plans on how you might recharge an Ogallala system. And then we've also, of late, in DC the other day, meeting with some folks, there seems to be some national conversation about Midwest to Pacific, how we develop a water supply system that meets this Western United States. You pointed out Arizona, I did not know this. I knew Arizona was water short, $2.6 trillion impact to the economy, and have no options and quit developing permits a few years back. They've actually got a Corps of Engineer project going out to the Pacific for desal. Those are the things we've got to do, and even those plans actually end up helping Texas long term. But here's the deal, the agricultural sector, we got to have them. But what I'm seeing too is a lot of the families have matured, nobody's coming back, and they're selling these properties for $30,000 to $50,000 an acre and walk away. So I have greater concerns of loss of agricultural production lands more than I have the water underneath it. I think we're going to figure that out.
Very good. Another front row, Bernie, if you can.
My question is a follow-up to her question. The logical use to the solution for the problem she poses may be using produced water for the data centers, because you don't have to process that anymore as much as what you need to do with produced water to get it into ag. What progress is being made with that? And to the legislators here, what can be done to remove the constraints so that can be effectively applied and soon?
I think you're speaking to a guardrails bill, number one. We had this conversation 4 years ago. We just didn't see this industry on warp speed. It caught everybody by surprise. We knew these guys were talking about coming to Texas, but we didn't see this. And now they're here. So we're a little bit late to the game, but a lot of these that are already installed realized on the front end when they came in, hey, we got a water issue or whatever. So those are where the brackish use, I've got several of them that in their cooling loop system, once they do the initial charge and take out a lot of the contaminants, they can adjust water levels where brackish may be in use. The power consumption, that hydraulic conversation, they can look at it, use brackish. So wherever brackish is a potential, that's good. But what I'm saying is that brackish is about 2,000 feet in my area. Fresh water goes from 0 to 1,500 to 2. 2,000 to 20,000 is an ocean. Some of it's marine caliber, some of it's 5,000 parts. So it's that water we as a state have to go to and start development for municipal use in the region and stuff. But these AI data centers, I'm just telling you, 80 acre feet a year is just not a big pool of water, and it's a massive. And that one is old technology. They've only been running a few years. That technology today is being replaced by even more water efficient technology with the good actors.
Let's go to the maybe the back of the room. I've got the center and the front. Let me see if we can get someone in the back. Why don't you just pick somebody to? There you go.
This will sound like it's off on a tangent a minute, but I live out in Dripping Springs, and kiddingly, when you talk about a drought, come on out, you can see it. But I was talking to a guy who's an engineer who does a lot of work in Saudi Arabia. And he was talking about Saudi Arabia's one of the cutting edges on desalinization. And at the moment, Saudi Arabia is dying to be friendly with the United States. And they have more money than they know what to do with. Have we ever thought of talking to them, perhaps? And I mean, I don't know that they really help us technologically, but at the same time, they want to. And Texas would be a state to talk to them because they understand what we do for a living.
Yeah, I think that the federal government, this administration specifically, has worked real hard to build partnerships. And an example that was given to us in a meeting the other day with a briefing from Secretary and some of the advisor groups in it, there was a $550 billion, what I call a line of credit, established with Japan. And in that line of credit, it is intended to build out infrastructure, water being one of those. The cost to the United States was pretty much zero. Trump had raised the tariff to 25%. He reduced it 10% to get the $550 billion line of credit set up. And in that process, we and them will share on the front end until each of us has recovered our cost 50-50. And then at that point, it becomes a 90-10 arrangement. So I say all that to say, I think similar conversations are with every country, and I think the Saudis are part of that. So he is looking for capital outside of the market, outside of other things, and he's using the tariff levers that he set up, and I think this was a plan all along. We gave up a 10% tariff that we didn't have before for a $550 billion line of credit to build out water and power. Not a bad deal. So those deals are being cut, and those are federal conversations.
Okay, thank you. How about another person maybe on this side in the back, if there's somebody there? Just want to make sure we cover the room.
Thank you. My name is Shannon Lanning. I live in Midland, so we love oil and gas. This is actually a question from my husband, who is not here because he deals a lot with water. And he was wondering if operators of desal facilities could be considered manufacturers and possibly skip paying sales tax on power, which would be a massive incentive for people to actually do that more.
I had a credit conversation about produced water the other day, yesterday, in fact, in my office. So we need to find a way where private sector has put in billions of dollars of investment, some of it new science, some of it risky, that when they proved out their point, we can help in that. So whether it's a credit, there was a conversation about how oil and gas flows and where that treatment center for the produced water goes, how we work out a credit situation for that. I haven't thought about that piece. I'm not that familiar exactly with how all that works, but I think we're agreeable if it gets us our infrastructure cheaper and quicker. Because we need all infrastructure cheaper and quicker, because I tell people if the $100,000 working family household can no longer afford the infrastructure we need to live, then it's too expensive. And I would argue we're pretty close to that. So cheaper and quicker is always a formula that gets my attention on how we incentivize it.
Totally agree.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I see Representative Kerwin's hand is up here, so I want to let her have a chance to ask a question. Hold on for the mic if you would. Right behind you.
Thank you. My question is on behalf of the rural communities, and a lot of questions on county authorities and also on the conservation district authorities. Could you talk about those two?
You expand a little bit on your question on conservation district authorities. Are you asking if they should have more?
More, and how varied are they across the state according to the rural communities that they're in?
Every GCD has access to the same system of adopting rules to effectively manage their groundwater, right? I think we have many GCDs who don't really fully understand the links that they can go to manage their groundwater. In my area in particular, in the groundwater conservation district where I live, the board members had no idea what their authority was because they've just kind of been a rubber stamp for the GM and the attorney representing the board. And so I think that we as a state have a duty to make sure that our groundwater conservation district board members undergo training to first have a basic understanding of what their responsibility is, and that's to manage the groundwater for the sustainability and the future use of future generations. And so, number one, I think that we as a legislature have given a lot of tools to groundwater conservation districts that they're not using. I think that they should update their rules every time they update their DFC. Anytime they change their desired future conditions, they need to do a rules, at least a review of their rules to see if they're adequately have rules to manage their groundwater conservation districts. Now, to counties, that kind of gets us into the question of the wide areas. How do we effectively manage groundwater in a county that does not have a groundwater conservation district? Right now, you can't. There's nothing that can be done. In my opinion, we need to begin to move towards more of an aquifer regional management system, maybe through the GMAs, the groundwater management areas, give them some more regulatory authority so that you do provide some protection of the white areas. I think, you know, we did, the legislature did the best it could by creating geopolitical boundaries for groundwater conservation districts, but the aquifers don't care about the boundaries on the surface, right? So we need to have more of the groundwater conservation districts that exist working together to manage the aquifer that they all share.
I would just add that we have 199 or 100, and probably legitimately we need about half of those to 75. A large part of them don't have any groundwater anymore to manage, and they just exist. Secondly, they're so woefully under-resourced. And what I've told people is this AI and all these industry revolutions coming into Texas are going to test us on our science on two levels. We have always said we've got 1,000 years of gas supply. Well, the Fermi plant, if it comes to fruition up in the Panhandle, is 2.6 billion cubic feet per day of gas. And then we've always said this aquifer has X number of years in it at this level under these rules. We're fixing to test the boundaries on everything that we think we have scientifically nailed down. I would make the argument our science on our brackish and aquifers and things where we think there's a good adequate source to plug into and produce a new supply that can justify the investment. I think we're close, but I'm not sure we're there yet. And we're going to have the Water Development Board conversations on maps and how they came up with that and where everybody's in the industry. Because the worst thing we can do is think we have something that we don't, only to find out after everybody's built out to find out that we were wrong. So I think this industry revolution or revival in Texas, which it's really not, it's what we do, and it's just we keep adding, is fixing to test some things that we think we know, but we're going to find out. So it's going to be kind of a scary time, but we're going to have to know these answers. But the GCDs, they are 100% science-based. If they're doing it right, we just have always assumed the science is accurate, but most of them are under-resourced. His example, the poor little district, had one permanent employee and one part-time employee, and they were tasked with the task. But truthfully, it's a prolific aquifer. I mean, it's one that most people would agree, oh, it's got all this water and we don't have to worry about it. We're going to find out, right, with the science. But it's just one of those areas where we need to go back and revisit. As far as rules go, I've tried to pass legislation of similar rules across the board so that this GCD is operating the way this GCD does, and that industry has been successful in killing it to the point that almost their reputation inside the Beltway in Austin is get rid of them, and they're a barrier. They're a vital need. We need to have them. They were put there by the Supreme Court for the reasons under the Day case that they recognize it is a fungible source that moves between people, and you got to have somebody watching it. That was our vehicle. But we do need responsible, consistent, and predictable practices across the board. We don't have that in our GCDs today.
And that will be our final word for this session. I want to thank Chairman Perry, Chairman Harris, Chairwoman Stepney. Thank you for your time, and you've advanced our knowledge.